Hello and welcome back to F1 Every Week. My name is Ben Wevel and today I'm going to be covering all of the best F1 rumours and news pieces on this first Sunday after the triple header. You can listen to the podcast on the streaming platform of your choice, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts and YouTube, all linked below. And without further ado, let's get into episode 74. First off this week, the drivers' market is being sent into a frenzy once more, with rumours being circulated that Nyck de Vries, who scored points on his first appearance in the sport last weekend at Monza, has signed with the Red Bull sister team of Alpha Tauri, despite being heavily dubbed to take Nicholas Latifi's seat at Williams next year instead. This came after the news that Red Bull were no longer pursuing the option of Colton Herta, the plan to force the FIA into giving the IndyCar racer a super license despite not having the required points seeming to have fallen through. It seems that from statements from high-ranking Red Bull members such as Helmut Marko, that decision to finally release Pierre Gasly from the folds of the Red Bull cult hinged solely upon the addition of Herta to the team's ranks next year. But from this rumour, it seems that the Frenchman is more expendable than was previously connoted. This now opens another swathe of questions, such as the trajectory of that second Haas seat next season, and whether Nicholas Latifi will somehow manage to hold on to that Williams drive. Well, there are certainly a plethora of possibilities. Daniel Ricciardo, whom I will talk about in more detail as part of another story later in the episode, looks set to take the Mercedes reserve driver role, which Lewis Hamilton dubbed the Aussie too talented to perform, which leaves a likely still empty seat at Haas. This could be the route back into F1 for the likes of Aston Martin reserve driver for this year, last year and the year before, Nico Hülkenberg, whom ESPN and Autosport both described as the main contender for the 2023 seat. Antonio Giovinazzi, who was being given an Alpine test in Hungary, as well as a pre-practice run in the Haas itself, despite having had a desultory 2022 season in FE, finishing last in the championship with 0 points, or even Daniel Kvyat, who will be driving in WEC next season. As things stand. It could also give an opportunity for some rookies, such as the Trump-loving Logan Sargent moving to Williams, or possibly Robert Schwartzman, who is making his FP1 debut in the Ferrari at the US Grand Prix to Haas. Made possible by the team's Ferrari engine connections. Before we move on, the move for Nyck has not yet been confirmed, but rumours are often partly truthful, so even if De Vries does not end up at AlphaTauri next year, as has been heavily rumoured, he has done more than enough to prove his worth and should be on the grid next year. Next, on to Daniel Ricciardo, who was greeted to a scathing review in a very contentious interview by the always outspoken 1997 Formula One world champion Jacques Villeneuve. On Wednesday, the fiery Canadian said that Daniel should not be taking the place of Fernando Alonso at Alpine next year because, according to Jaques, Ricciardo has had 2 awful years at Renault and 2 even worse years at McLaren. That's 4 years, so almost half of his F1 career has been bad. First of all, Daniel's second year at Renault was an absolute masterclass with 2 podiums in the 5th best car on the grid and 5th place in the Constructors' Championship at nearly 120 points, having dominated his teammate in both seasons with Renault. Granted, Daniel has struggled at McLaren this year, but last year was an acceptable performance with 8th in the championship and a victory. A bit of a disappointment, but a far cry from the dramatic label which Jaques has put on it. But now, let's take a look at the hypocrisy of this statement from Jaques by looking at his own F1 career, considering the fact that he classifies anything below 5th in the championship as awful. Okay, it's a great start for the Canadian, with 2nd place in the WDC in 1996 and a World Championship victory the following season. Nice job. 98 next, he's stuck with Williams and it's 5th place. Just on the cusp there, but I'll give it to him. Now on to 1999, and he made the switch to BAR and came away with a grand total of 0 points, 12 retirements, and he wasn't even classified in the Drivers' Championship. I mean, if 5th, 8th and 9th is bad for Ricciardo, I'm almost tempted to give him double points for this one. But it is his first awful season, so I'll stay true to my word. Now, the Canadian stayed with BAR until 2003 and managed 2 7th places, 12th and 16th. I'm afraid that's 4 more dreadful showings from Jaques. In fact, he did so poorly in his final season with BAR that he was fired before the final round and took part in the final 3 rounds of the 2004 Renault campaign, scoring another goose egg, 0 points. Jaques ended his F1 career at Sauber, finishing 14th and 15th. Safe to say, it's not looking good. So, the results are in. By Jacques Villeneuve's own metric, he had 8 terrible seasons from 11 in the sport, which is over 3/4 of the time he spent in Formula 1. Even when disregarding those 2 7th places, that's 6 from 11, which, by my calculations, is over half. So, Jaques, you played yourself. Now onto some lighter news, and it was announced earlier in the week that the recently crowned Formula 2 champion Felipe Drugovich has landed himself a reserve driver role for the 2023 season with Aston Martin. This came after the announcement that the Brazilian would be taking part in an FP1 session with Aston Martin in the final round of the season at Abu Dhabi, and would also be taking part in the Young Drivers Test after the season has reached its conclusion. And he is the first addition to the team's new AM F1 driver development program. And Felipe has been a huge success story, having made it to the summit despite not having a major F1 connection. So the fact that he now has a sustainable option for the future is phenomenal news for his future in motorsport. Finally this week, McLaren F1 CEO Zak Brown threw some shade upon competitor Otmar Szafnauer as to the handling of the Oscar Piastri saga, citing that the Alpine team principal has been made to look silly after his confident comments regarding Piastri's situation for 2023. I feel that this is another somewhat hypocritical statement, as Zak himself has been made to look rather foolish, after he made comments after Oscar Piastri was signed for 2023, stating that Daniel Ricciardo would be with the team next year, which, as I have commented on many times in the past, has painted the McLaren boss as severely dishonest. Also, the fact that Brown is not letting this situation go seems childish and unnecessary, and it seems that all parties involved should just leave this incident in the past and focus on their respective futures instead. Thank you for listening to F1 Every Week. Tune in next week for some more F1 news, and in a few weeks' time for my review of the 2022 Singapore Grand Prix.